One of the most interesting things about psychology, and cognition in particular, is that our intuitions about how our mind works is almost always wrong. And that's what makes this so fun and exciting. My name is Michael Hout. I study cognitive science, specifically cognitive psychology. My primary focus is on vision. So I study visual perception, things related to how the brain interprets the information that's brought in from our eyes. So what interests me most about cognition is I like studying the mind and I like puzzles. And studying cognition is sort of the best way to combine those two things. The primary thing I study is visual search, and it's something that we do probably hundreds of times a day. You know, we look for our belongings before we leave the house. And so I study sort of the machinery that goes on when people are doing these things that they're effectively taking entirely for granted. This is a test of working memory to try to remember all the experiments that are currently going on. Right now, we're starting to look at something called hybrid search. This is a relatively new thing that's being studied, and we're doing some experiments looking at people's ability to effectively search for a whole lot of things at once. When we look for things in our environment, our attention is directed by the similarity relationships in the environment. And those can be visual, so if I'm looking for, say, a ketchup bottle in the fridge, my attention is going to be directed to things that are similar to the ketchup bottle, such as things that share the shape of the bottle, things that are red, and so on. Another aspect of similarity that affects how we search for things is semantic similarity, so things that are related semantically to the thing that we might be searching for. In my lab, we've got a variety of different resources. So our primary resource is the departmental eye tracker. That is a state-of-the-art SR Systems iLink 1000 eye tracker. So we bring them into the eye tracking room, which is dimly lit and set up in such a way that it's conducive to tracking a person's eye movements. So we sit them in front of the computer. There is a large chin rest that sits in front of them. And then in between them and the computer screen, there's really just a little device that sits on the table that is effectively a camera and an LED, so a light-emitting diode. So our participants will sit in the eye tracker, and then they do some kind of visual search experiment typically. So they might be looking for something simple, they might be searching through displays looking for real-world objects, a variety of different things, but the general setup is the same. In my lab in particular, we've got a number of different rooms. We've got space for our graduate students to have offices or to work. So we've got banks of normal computers that we can conduct our experiments on, bring in a couple people at a time, sit them down, have them do our experiments. The potential impact of our work tends to be on the basic front, although the work that we do has very obvious application in a lot of situations. So for instance, a lot of the work that we do is related to something called the low prevalence effect, which is the sort of counterintuitive finding that things that you don't find often are actually harder to find. And that's a huge problem for someone like a TSA baggage screener, because the things that they find really often are probably the things that are innocuous, like water bottles. But if somebody gets through security with a gun, which is unlikely to happen, but if the TSA screener misses that, that can be potentially a huge problem. So we study in very controlled situations the prevalence of how often things show up in our visual search experiments. Collaborating with students in the lab is probably the most fun aspect of my job, because the things that I work on with my graduate students, it's primarily their research. It's fun because I just genuinely enjoy doing the research, and you know, I'm not trying to discover things by myself, I'm discovering things with another person, and that can be hugely gratifying because it's sort of this shared success or shared failure from time to time. And it's also really fun to teach them all the things that I learned from my own faculty mentor when I was in graduate school. I find that students are much more open to learning from you, much more willing to ask you difficult questions and give you feedback if they feel comfortable. One of the things that keeps me here is that NMSU and my department in particular has made it extremely easy for me to do my job. I've known a lot of professors who have moved into new jobs, and they hit a lot of stumbling blocks. And I like being an independent researcher, I like being an independent person. And so the College of Arts and Sciences and the psychology department have provided me with the resources to do my job and let me conduct my research. And that's helped me be incredibly productive. And if I'm productive, I'm happy. I get paid to satisfy my own curiosity. I have to do a lot of other stuff as well, of course, but my primary job is to do research experiments and figure out how the mind works, which is something I'm just naturally curious about. I mean, I couldn't imagine a more fun job than that. Michael Hout, Department of Psychology, College of Arts and Sciences.